Bowl games, no matter how many there are, no matter what they entail, we just can't get enough of them. But in the history of America's favorite postseason tradition, few programs can boast as much success as the Florida State Seminoles. For this episode of Take 5, we asked our message boards at Warchant.com and a panel of experts just which bowl games are the best of the best at FSU. Just one condition: national title games and playoff appearances aren't allowed. That's a different list for a different day. Our countdown starts down on the bayou, where FSU would defeat one of the biggest thorns in their side in the 1980s, the 1989 Sugar Bowl, FSU versus Auburn.
That was an ugly game. I remember thinking about that game. This is a hideous game. Can we just find a way to get a win?
In a matchup that saw Florida State's high-powered offense go up against the Tigers' stout defense, points were at a premium. The Seminoles' only touchdown would come from Dane Williams in the first quarter. After a scoreless second half, Auburn was starting to drive in the closing minutes.
FSU scored early on, kept holding on to that lead, but you just held your breath that the game might tilt at the last minute to Auburn.
Auburn's driving. That drive is a drive that, at the time, defense looks tired. It's had to carry the day because it's such a low-scoring game. And ultimately, you were hoping that a big play would occur, and who better to make a big play than Deion Sanders.
Picked off by Prime Time. What timing? Neon Deion with his name up in lights.
Prime Time's pick would secure the Seminoles' 13-7 victory and would set the standard for the next decade of Seminole football, just like our number 4 game did, the 2010 Chick-fil-A Bowl.
We played a big-time opponent who had just, been in the SEC championship game. They had a great year against a historical coach, one of the greatest coaches in college football history. And we were an upstart, as I say, not an upstart program, but an upstart from a new regime of how to do things. And it was important for me, in my opinion, not only to win our league games. We played very well in our league. We lost the league championship game that year. We won our Atlantic Division. But to go play a quality opponent from the SEC who was really highly regarded and show our kids that we are back on that national stage and we can play with anybody in America.
After losing in their first ACC title game in almost half a decade, FSU set its sights on a 10-win season. But to push the program into the future, it would have to vanquish a foe from its past.
Face Burger one last time, the SEC Eastern champion. That was a big deal at this time, with the SEC becoming maniacal with their allegiance to a conference as opposed to their individual teams, and wanting to prove that Florida State was once again reemerging as a preeminent power.
The Seminoles went out to prove a point, and they did so with a bang.
Out in the flat, Lattimore loses the football, picked up by Florida State on the far sideline.
I remember being in the press box for that play, and the whole box just went, ooh, like, and everybody just assumed it was an illegal hit. And then we all looked at the replay and like, no, that was a clean, just a fantastic hit.
Greg Reed and Dustin Hopkins helped ring in a new era of Seminole football with a 26-17 final, only a year after a bowl game marked the end of an era. Our number 3 bowl game of all time, the 2010 Gator Bowl, Bobby Bowden's final game.
Wanting so much for that to end well for Coach Bowden. I mean, there's no question, no matter where you stood in that debate, whether you were for moving on that year or a year prior to that, or if you were in his camp, that he could stay forever, as long as he wanted, because of what he had accomplished and what he had built and what he represented. You knew this has to end well. They got to get a win. They got to get a win for Bobby Bowden, and we all wanted that.
Per Bobby Bowden's request, his final game would be played in the state of Florida, leading the Seminoles to a showdown in Jacksonville against Bowden's former team, West Virginia.
It didn't start well, and Noel Devine felt like he was going to run for hundreds of yards, and that there was going to be no way to stop him, because this was not a banner Florida State team.
But as the sun began to rise over a rain-drenched River City, the tide began to turn, thanks to a defense looking to win one from Mickey Andrews, and a gutsy performance by freshman E.J. Manuel.
Everybody was behind Coach Bowden that day. They wanted this for him. They wanted him to go on a positive note. For him to be able to go out in that way was truly special for him and his players, and to see all those former players come in the walk beforehand and support him. It really showed what he brought to this program to a lot of young men over the years.
Despite the controversy and conflicts of the 2009 season, Bobby Bowden would go out victorious on the shoulders of his players and into the lore of college football. A lore that no doubt includes our number 2 game, the 1988 Fiesta Bowl, Florida State, Nebraska.
You could sense Florida State was on the verge of something, and every time you could get a significant win against a name program, you knew it was another notch in the belt, a chance to send a message to the rest of the country that Florida State wasn't just a team on the rise, but was a team that could beat anybody in the country on any given day.
The Huskers were an established power that had a history with the Seminoles in the 1980s. However, those incredible upsets seemed like they were long forgotten, as Nebraska was driving down the field to put the game away in the fourth quarter.
Nebraska's driving, they got an opportunity to score, fumble the football. Florida State recovers, has to go 97 yards.
The game was put on the shoulders of FSU quarterback Danny McManus, as the Seminoles would need to go the length of the field to take the lead.
Danny McManus orchestrates the 11-play, 97-yard drive, and then for a little bit more drama, of course, converts the 4th and 15 pass to win the game.
End zone touchdown!
The momentum of the victory would continue into the Seminoles' 1988 season, the official start of FSU's historic dynasty. While the win over Nebraska was sweet and significant, there are few wins that can be called as sweet as sugar, like our #1 bowl game of all time, the 1995 Sugar Bowl, the fifth quarter and the French Quarter, after the choke at Doak.
Welcome to overtime in New Orleans.
Once it's 31-17, you begin to feel it is inevitable. It's going to happen. Only time can stop it now. And so to get the opportunity to put the stamp on what was the greatest comeback in college football history, you felt like it was inevitable. You felt like that bowl game was a Florida State win. It was going to happen.
After the 31-31 tie in Tallahassee, Florida State would come out swinging in New Orleans with phenomenal play from Danny Cannell, the Florida State offense, and noted Gator Slayer Warrick Dunn.
And here's a guy who went back to Louisiana where he grew up and got to do that in his home state. And I'll never forget the cool trick play he had where he had got the pitch and made the pass. A lot of people don't remember Warrick Dunn was a high school quarterback, and a 73-yard touchdown to Omar Ellison in that game.
Florida State would win the fifth quarter 23-17 in a game that was a sign of things to come in the most storied decade of one of college football's most storied rivalries.
That was just a great game, a fun game, a hard-hitting game. It really came to epitomize the rivalry, right? What was going to happen with those two teams the remainder of the 90s.
So as Florida State heads to the postseason for yet another year, one thing is for certain. No matter the bowl, no matter the matchup, history can be made at any time, and any game can be a classic.